Hello, in this video we'll talk about the lore and story of Subnautica. This video will be full of spoilers, and part of the charm of this game comes from discovering the story yourself, so please go play before watching this video. Okay, let's see the lore chronologically before getting into the story. The lore begins with the precursor aliens, or architects, or just aliens, a race much more technologically advanced than humans. It was a vast civilization which expanded throughout many different planets. They studied less developed species, trading or collecting technology and artifacts, the human race included, as we can see blades and representations of concepts like yin and yang in the alien facilities. So they were either influenced by us, or they influenced our culture, religions and languages in the past. At some point, these aliens bumped into a bacterium called Kara, or Kara. This bacterium attacked the immune system of the host, followed by green skin lesions and flu-like symptoms, alterations to the biological structure, and finally, a total failure of executive functions. This disease spread throughout their colonies, killing billions of them. Around 1000 years ago, they found a planet that they thought would be the key to find a cure, planet 4546b. They decided to send a group of researchers to look for a cure in this planet, and they established different facilities for this purpose. The quarantine enforcement platform, a laser cannon which would shoot at anything entering or leaving the planet while the quarantine was active. Should the bacteria escape the research facility, the whole planet would be put in quarantine and everything would be sealed inside. Along with the cannon, the other defense mechanism was a creature called Warper, a creature capable of teleporting itself and their prey in space. These are genetically modified creatures obtained by mixing unknown creatures' DNA and precursor technology. Their function is to hunt down any organism infected with the bacteria. The Disease Research Facility, a facility in which they experimented on live specimens with the objective of synthesizing an antidote.
This alien structure appears to have collapsed to the sea floor.
A thermal power facility which generated energy for all the facilities and the warpers. Sanctuaries, and the primary containment facility. Here is where they brought the only species that could help them produce an antidote, the Sea Emperor Leviathan. The Sea Emperor is a giant creature capable of manufacturing a substance called Enzyme 42, the only known substance that can neutralize the effect of the bacterium. However, the specimen they brought in could not produce a stable enzyme, possibly due to old age. They tried to extract the enzyme from embryos and eggs, but to no avail. If these juveniles were born outside their natural conditions, they could not produce the enzymes. On top of that, the aliens couldn't find a way to trigger the hatching process of the eggs. The Sea Emperor possessed telepathic abilities and tried to communicate with them, but they couldn't hear. So, the aliens had to place the remaining eggs into the incubator device in the containment facility and wait. This facility was specifically built for the conservation of this species, to keep it alive as long as possible. They experimented on several different species in the Disease Research Facility. At some point, they brought in an egg from a sea dragon Leviathan. Its mother followed them and rammed into the facility, destroying it. This attack caused a breach in the containment of the bacteria. It spread out and infected all living organisms on the planet. All attempts to develop the enzyme into a vaccine were unsuccessful. The quarantine was automatically activated and doomed the alien race, which, as a last resort, uploaded their consciousness into the sanctuary's databases. The flora and fauna of the planet quickly started to die. All the other Sea Emperors died because of lack of food, and the only one still alive, the one inside the facility, was not able to produce the enzyme with efficacy. This drastic change in the environment forced all species to rapidly evolve and adapt to this new, deserted ecosystem. The facility in which they encaged the Sea Emperor possessed several ventilation ducts that dragged oxygenated water from the surface and then pumped it back out. These ducts also trapped a kind of fish called peepers. These peepers evolved to transport the enzymes produced by the Sea Emperor. This is reflected in different features, like nasal cavities that can detect this enzyme, and the fact that they actively approach other creatures, including predators. These peepers, which can be seen as shiny people swimming around, are the reason why the enzyme reached the remaining organisms and life could thrive once again in this part of the ocean. Humanity started expanding through the galaxy. During the expansion period, war broke out due to the lack of rules in these matters. It was a free-for-all. Alterra was a weapon manufacturer which provided weapons for all sides of the conflict, thus growing in influence, power, and workforce. The war faced a turning point when Alterra threatened with ceasing their commercial activities with all bands implicated on the expansion war. All of them had to sign a treaty called the Charter, a legal contract which established laws for the exploration, colonization, and governing of space. The different factions that signed this contract adopted the name of Trans-System Government, or Transgov, Alterra being one of them. Despite being a Transgov, Alterra considers itself a corporation, so they mostly focus on economic growth. Being one of the biggest trans-governments and owning 9% of all phase gates within the galaxy. A phase gate is like a portal between two regions. Alterra is a giant corporation that gathers all kinds of resources and provides new and innovative technologies, and which is also the top supplier of the Trans-System Federation, the military police that make sure that all the governments follow the chart. Alterra is a massive company, and that means it has competition. One of the competitors is a corporation from the Mongolian states called Torgal. But before changing the topic, here are some random facts that I liked. Today's humanity mostly eats synthetic food, so eating fish is kind of a cultural shock to our protagonist once we get there. Everything that we can gather belongs to Alterra, and we have to pay the full market price for everything that we use once we are rescued. Back then, you could create weapons in your life pod, but this function was removed after a massacre took place. And apparently, everything revolves around the market now, even relationships. Okay, let's keep going. After the war finished, the peripheral colonies of China stopped being useful for them, so they decided to leave them to starve. These colonies declared independence and tried to become self-sufficient. Today, the Mongolian states are seen as a relatively minor power on the outskirts of colonized space, yet it remains one of the fastest expanding transgovs in the galaxy, and they incorporated some Chinese customs like eating non-synthetic food. Within these states, there's a relatively small corporation called Torgal. They are also into building phase gates and mining resources, so Paul Torgal, the owner of the company, Bart, his son, and other crew members will embark on a mission on a ship called the Gassi. Ten years before our arrival, the cannon shot down the Degassi, a Mongolian ship that got too close to the planet. Of the 6 crew members on board, only 3 survived: Paul, Bart, and Margaret, a mercenary hired by Paul to be their bodyguard. They found a floating island in the middle of the ocean and established their first base there. They built homes and crops. Paul wanted to stay there and wait for help, but Margaret suspected the climate would turn against them. She knew they would need to get their feet wet sooner or later. Meanwhile, Bart was fascinated by the life on this planet and dedicated his time to studying the local flora and fauna. She was right. A heavy storm destroyed their crops and part of their house by causing a landslide. Paul had to listen to Margaret, and they moved to the Jellyshroom Cave, a cave system between 200 and 300 meters deep. Paul was happy to find the huge lithium reserves that existed there and only thought about selling them and making money. In this cave, they found the first traces of precursor technology, a tablet. Margaret wanted to find out the truth behind it. Somebody must have been here before, and she suggests moving even deeper. Of course, Paul refuses, and tension kept growing between them. They are forced to move again since the hull was leaking, now 500 meters deep, in the deep Grand Reef. Bart keeps studying the planet and discovers the bitter truth. They are infected with an unknown bacterium, something never seen before, and not only them, but every life form on this planet was infected with it. They started to develop the symptoms of the disease, and Bart takes on the task of investigating it and maybe find a cure. Margaret helps Bart in his investigation. She brings living specimens to the base for him to analyze. After Margaret brings an injured Reaper Leviathan to the base, a second Reaper, having followed Margaret, attacked and destroyed the base. She fights the Reaper, but she's taken into the depths of the abyss. Paul saw a light coming from the distance and decided to follow it. That light may have been a mesmer, a crab squid, or an alien facility. He died on the way. He was either attacked by a predator or died due to lack of oxygen. Bart manages to escape and builds himself a sea base near the surface. He keeps hearing the voice of the Sea Emperor, which tries to communicate with him several times, but he just thinks he lost his mind. Finally, he decides to go back to the island and leaves a final message there.
We shouldn't have gone so deep. They do not want us down there. Despite my best efforts, ill health is taking hold of me. The visions are getting worse. Marguerite and Father are now part of the ecosystem of this incredible planet. It's reassuring to know that when I go, I'll join them. Until then, well, there's always the view.
Days pass, the disease takes over, and Bart dies. Although it seems unlikely anyone would survive, Margaret didn't die. We hear news from her again in Below Zero. She survived the attack and moved to the frozen region of the planet. And of course, the original plan of building a phase gate here never came to fruition, and the owner of the corporation and his son were reported missing. The last piece of lore before diving into the story. As part of the exploration program, Altera sent a ship called the Aurora to the Ariadne Arm. Their mission was to build a phase gate there. And they had a secondary mission, unknown to most of the crew, to find and, if possible, rescue the survivors of another ship called the Degassi, which disappeared in this region 10 years ago, or at least find out what happened to them with their brand new scanning technology. The main character of the game, Riley Robinson, is part of this mission. While trying to perform a slingshot maneuver when passing close to the planet, the cannon hits us with an energy pulse. We take one of the many escape pods to survive. While we escape, we see the Aurora blowing up, and we fall into the vast ocean of planet 4546b. A piece of metal hits us in the face, rendering us unconscious. 3 hours later, we wake up, climb out of the pod, and have a first glance at our new residence. A huge ocean, only interrupted by the sight of a wrecked Aurora. And here the story begins. We have to survive on this planet, gathering materials and creating tools. After some days, we can repair our radio. The first message is an automatic message from the Aurora, which confirms that help is not on its way. We also receive messages from other survivors, other people who also use the pods. Unfortunately, whenever we find them, it's already too late. Some of them died on the landing, others were devoured by predators. One of them shot their own gasoline tank by mistake, and others just vanished without a trace, aka they were killed by the warpers. We can even intercept 2 transmissions from the warpers. The first one tells us that there are 9 survivors. The second one will say that we are the only survivor left, but they don't know where we are. As we explore, we can find a floating island, which contains a purple alien tablet and Bart's final message. The Aurora's core reaches a critical state and explodes during the first days, releasing high amounts of radiation into the environment, but at the same time, opening a window for us to try to find resources and information inside the ship. More than a window is like half the ship, but still. We can explore the Aurora and find different audio logs. The most important one is a transmission received by the Aurora 8 hours after the incident. Due to the distance, sending a rescue mission isn't viable, but there's another solution. They will send the schematics for a rocket that we can build using materials that can be found on this planet. The rocket requires materials found at great depths, so it will take us some time to build. A couple of days pass, and a ship that was passing by picks up the Aurora's distress call and sends us a message telling us they are on their way. This ship is the Sunbeam. As days pass by, they update their location and send us reassuring messages, until they finally give us the coordinates of the place in which they will land. Unfortunately, the coordinates take us to the quarantine enforcement platform. We patiently wait for the ship. When they are inside, the alien structure starts moving, takes aim, and destroys the ship in front of our eyes. We can use the purple tablet here to open the gate. The structure is quiet, there's nobody here. Just us, and the remains of an ancient civilization. At the bottom of the structure, we can find a control panel that deactivates the quarantine. But something comes out and analyzes our blood. The result? We are infected. The same bacteria that killed everyone who came here before us. The whole planet is a giant quarantine zone. The only way to get out is to first get rid of this bacterium and deactivate the cannon. We start suffering from hallucinations after the Sunbeam incident, the same ones that Marge saw back then. The Sea Emperor is trying to communicate with us. As we keep going deeper, we find a cave system only accessible with a prawn suit or a cyclops, the entrance to the Lost River. A biome guarded by a ghost leviathan and other creatures, in which center we can find the remains of ancient giant creatures, much bigger than anything we encountered before, from a time in which life on this planet was completely different. As an interesting fact, the tree we found right before entering the lava zone is a nesting ground for the ghost leviathan eggs. Then, the juvenile ghost leviathans will live in the cave, and finally get out to live in the void zones, eating microorganisms. Going even deeper, into the active lava zone, we get to the primary containment facility, and we are greeted by the Sea Emperor. The Sea Emperor is 2600 years old now. It surpassed its life expectancy thanks to the alien facility. But its eggs haven't hatched yet, and they won't without the proper hatching enzyme. So, this is our final mission, to help the eggs hatch and use the young Emperor's enzymes to cure our disease and deactivate the quarantine once and for all. The ingredients are different types of plants found near the portals scattered around the planet. We synthesize the enzyme and put it in the incubator. After 1,000 years of waiting, the little babies can finally be born. We can now use the enzyme and be cured from the Kara. The Leviathan, knowing it has fulfilled its role, thanks us and can now die in peace. We get back to the surface, get scanned again, and the quarantine is deactivated. Just some resource gathering to build a rocket, and that's it. We'll be free from this planet. And this is how it ends. We made it. With a combined effort of 3 different species.
Forming gravity turn maneuver.
As we leave, the Sea Emperor Leviathan communicates with Riley one last time, right before we reach our home planet.
We are different, but we go together.
And that's the end of the game. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please leave a like, a comment, or a subscription, and see you in the next one.
Welcome home to Alterra. Permission to land will be granted once you have settled your outstanding balance of 1 trillion credits.